So the gaming industry has been around for several decades now, and I don't know when it comes down to like female characters in relation to gaming. A lot of people have their own respective opinion on who the most popular ones are. In my opinion, three big names come to mind, and to me, it would be like Laura Croft, Princess Peach, and maybe Samus Aran. And the crazy thing is, like, you look at Super Mario Brothers, you look at Metroid, and you look at Tomb Raider. Those are all IPs from like back in the day, like the 80s and the 90s. And Princess Peach made her debut in the Super Mario Brothers game from 1985. So that was like 40 years ago, which is insane. And then you have the original Metroid game, which came out in the NES back in 1986. And then you have Tomb Raider, which came out during the PS1 era, which was back in 1996, I want to say. And I feel like all those games have, or not the games, but I feel like each one of those IPs have evolved significantly over time to a point where they are among three of the most popular and most recognizable franchises of all time. You look at the Super Mario Brothers franchise. I think it's made more than like 60 billion, like since its inception. And then you look at Tomb Raider, it's made more than like 2 billion, like worldwide since its inception. And I feel like it's one of those things where I feel like the franchises evolve, and I feel like everything we've been getting like recently within the past like decade or so, I feel like it doesn't it doesn't click with like casuals as much as some of the older stuff does. And then you look at Metroid. I don't know exactly how much money the Metroid series has made, but I know that in terms of like video games, since its inception, it's sold more than 21 million worldwide. And I feel like that's not necessarily a great number considering the fact that the IP's been around since 1986. But at the same time, you got to look at Metroid and you got to look at all the other IPs that Nintendo own. Obviously, Nintendo has more popular IPs that they focus on, whether it be The Legend of Zelda, and whether it be Donkey Kong or anything else. And that's another thing. You look at the Legend of Zelda series. A lot of people will probably go on record and say that Zelda is one of the most, iconic, female characters of all time because, um, I mean, just about every Zelda title that's come out has had her name in it, even though she's been the damsel of distress, and Link was always like the silent protagonist. But there's really been no like character evolution with characters like Zelda or Princess Peach up until recently, because I think Nintendo recently gave Princess Peach her own game back in 2024, and I think they gave Princess Zelda her own like spin-off game as well. And the fact that it took Nintendo that long to give Princess Peach and Zelda their own games is crazy. I think Princess Peach initially got her own game back in 2006 for Nintendo DS. It was like a platformer that kind of fell off the radar because there was a lot of like big things happening in mid 2000s with the PS3 and the Xbox 360 and the PSP and all that other stuff. But I digress. I feel like, yeah, I feel like for the most part, like these three are three of the biggest names, or at least the most recognizable names in gaming in relation to like female characters. But I feel like for the most part, Laura Croft is a character that people could probably look up to the most because I feel like she's had the most success in terms of being the main protagonist of her own franchise. Like from the very get go, she was like, the main character. And some of her most iconic games came from the PS1 era, the 90s. And then we got that movie back in the early 2000s with Angelina Jolie, which did good in box office revenue. And and I feel like the games from the 2000s, like Angel of Darkness and Tomb Raider Underworld, and even the Tomb Raider game from 2006, they were all pretty good. But I feel like that was kind of a dark period for the Tomb Raider series, only because a lot of other IPs and franchises were starting to become more popular. You had like the GTA series becoming more popular. You had racing games becoming more popular. Um, you had first person shooters, becoming a thing. So I feel like, because of all of that, the Tomb Raider series kind of, took a hit in terms of popularity during the 2000s. But then in the teens decade, Tomb Raider started to get popular again because we got that game from 2013, which did very well. I think it ended up being like the best selling game within the entire franchise. And then we got the Tomb Raider game from 2018, Shadow of Tomb Raider, which was actually pretty good as well. But I don't know. I don't feel like those games are quite as iconic as the older ones, but it goes to show you that Laura Croft is still a huge attraction in this day and age. And and I feel like out of the 3 names that, I have mentioned, I feel like she's the one that has had, like, the most success in terms of being a a female protagonist that actually, goes out and kicks butt and basically, goes on adventures and, do all, stuff like that. Um, Princess Peach, for the most part, has always remained the same character up until, I guess, recently. And Samus Aran was kind of like the first lady of gaming in the sense where she was like the first, at least in my opinion, the first female protagonist to, I guess, to have her own story and to, I guess, be a woman that kicks butt and pretty much have her own like video game franchise. But obviously, Samus Aran didn't have as much success as Lara Croft, and um, and it's crazy to think that Lara Croft is probably like she's like one of the like only like female protagonists to become as big as she did outside of like Nintendo. And and I feel like for the most part, we have like a lot of other like female protagonists that has come up over time in different, video game franchises, but let's be honest, I don't think we're ever going to have another character like Lara Croft ever. And the reason I say that is because you look at like video games nowadays, they're not about creating mascots or creating characters or anything like that. It's all just graphics. It's all just like, you know, storytelling. It's I don't know, everything just feels like really bland, and there's not much emphasis, placed on, creating larger than life characters that can connect with casuals or anything like that. I feel like that's something that died like after the 90s or the early 2000s or something like that because you look at like the PS1 era, you had a lot of like larger than life characters, whether it be Laura Croft, whether it be Crash Bandicoot, whether it be Spyro the Dragon, whether it be Rayman. You don't see characters like that anymore. And I feel like there's some like, indie games or indie video game companies that try making characters or, stuff like that, but it just doesn't work. It's not the same. And I feel like it's because, the business has evolved so much over time. And and I feel like that's one of the reasons why, like, the classics, tend to stand the test of time, and, you look at, a lot of these, older characters that are still, like, relevant and popular today. It's insane because it makes you think, what would the gaming industry be like without them, you know what I mean? And you look at like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. I mean, that's a game that people are still waiting for. We're supposed to be getting it sometime this year, but I don't think Nintendo was committed to an official release date. And at this point, I'm getting nervous, and I'm starting to think that they'll probably just push it back until 2026, which would be a slap in the face to a lot of people because people have been waiting for Metroid Prime 4 since 2017 because I believe the game was first it was we saw just like the logo, and then it was being hyped up, and then I believe Nintendo was working with another developer. That developer got dropped, and they got the developer that worked on the 3 Metroid Prime games. And, and yeah, even though we saw gameplay footage of it and everything, um, yeah, we still haven't gotten an official release or an official release date or anything like that. And, I'm not exactly sure when we're gonna get a brand new, Tomb Raider entry or anything like that, but, I'm hoping we get it before the PlayStation 6 comes out. And as you know, we're still waiting for the next mainline Super Mario Brothers game, the game that's going to, I guess, follow Super Mario Odyssey, if Nintendo can top that. But yeah, I feel like Nintendo should have given Peach a more proactive role in video games a lot sooner than they did. Um, Samus Aran, even though she's contributed a lot to the video game industry, um, over time, especially like during the teens decade, she kind of became an afterthought because I feel like the 2000s was probably when the Metroid series was at its peak. We got like the best games. We got the Metroid Prime trilogy, which really shined on the GameCube and on the Wii. And Laura Croft, for the most part, has always had good games within the Tomb Raider series, like since the '90s. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like those three women are probably the most iconic names within the video game industry. And I don't know. Everyone has their own list and their own respective opinion on who they are, but I feel like those three kind of help, shaped the industry into like what it is right now. And I feel like for the most part, like without Laura Croft, how different would things be? Without Princess Peach in the Mario series, how different would the landscape of gaming be? Without Samus Aran being the first lady, how different would the landscape of gaming be? It really makes you wonder.